Okay, well, hi everyone. Like I said, my name is Grâce Ndjako, and I'm affiliated with the University of Amsterdam, where I do my PhD. I also studied at the University of Amsterdam, political science and philosophy, and I also studied at the Sorbonne in Paris. Yeah, yeah, and next to my work as philosopher, PhD candidate. I translated Aimé Césaire's Discourse sur le colonialisme from French to Dutch, and um, I also translated the poems of Nele Marianne. Nele Marianne was the first Belgian poet of African descent, Congolese descent. I translated those poems as well from French to Dutch, and also write for various publications in the Netherlands, such as the Nederlandse Boekengids, etc. So yes, and today I'm going to talk to you a bit about my research, part of my research PhD project, which is on the limits of critique, and as European philosophy is often presented as universal. I was looking at the limits uh, of the various, looking at the limits of various supposed universalities, because this has also been often the work that anti-colonial thinkers, such as also Aimé Césaire, have done to look at, and also Franz Fanon, when they looked at those things that Europe has promoted as being universal everywhere, and just to see, to have the experience that, oh, when it comes to the other, when it comes to Africans, apparently there are limits to those supposed universal ideals. So let's start. So some years ago, I noticed how many false things I had accepted as true in my childhood, and how doubtful were the things that I subsequently built on them, and therefore that once in a lifetime everything should be completely overturned, and I should begin again from the most basic foundations if I ever wish to establish anything firm and durable in the sciences. So these are the opening lines to the Cartesian meditations. French philosopher René Descartes is one of those thinkers that any philosophy student will be introduced to in their first year. And he's firmly established as a canonical philosopher. His work is regarded as a turning point in Western philosophy. In academia, modern philosophy is presented as starting with him and his radical doubt that led to his cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. A doubt that is primarily aimed at the foundations. As Descartes argues the point as follows: but since reason already convinces us that we should withhold assent just as carefully from whatever is not completely certain and undubitable as from what is clearly false, if I find some reason for doubt in each of my beliefs, that will be enough to reject all of them. However, they need not all be reviewed individually, for that would be an infinite task. As soon as foundations are undermined, everything built on them collapses of its own accord. And therefore, I will challenge directly all the first principles on which everything I formerly believed rests. And this Cartesian doubt is presented as something universal, because Western philosophy is thought to be universal. And Cartesian philosophy was also taught to colonial subjects in the French colonies. Certainly, there was pushback against this imposed education and culture, with the critique of Cartesian reason being aimed at the dualistic aspect of it. So the binary thinking inherent in the Cartesian reason, Cartesian logic, the separation of the body and soul, the subject and object, and ultimately that of the I and the other. This was rejected by Black thinkers and writers, such as Martinican writer-thinker Aimé Césaire, who in his seminal poem Cahier d'un retour au pays natal wrote des mots, ah oui, des mots. Raison, je te sacre vent du soir. Bouche de l'or ton nom, Aimé corolle du fouet. Beauté, je t'appelle pétition de la pierre. Mais ah, la contrebande de mon rire. Ah, mon trésor de salpêtre. Parce que nous vous haïssons, vous et votre raison. Nous nous réclamons de la démence précoce de la flambée flambante du cannibalisme ténace. So the reason that Césaire talks about here in Raison, je te sacre vent du soir, and then later also in parce que nous vous haïssons, vous et votre raison. The reason he talks about here is Cartesian reason. He rejects this and embraces madness. He likens Cartesian reason to a whip. So that the micro du fouet, that's the whip. But this was not only this was not the only critique Césaire had of Cartesian logic. The problem was that the Europeans who had imposed this logic were rather inconsistent with it. As he states in Discourse sur le colonialisme, their barbaric reputation for the sake of the cause of Descartes' statement, the charter of universalism, that reason is found whole and entire in each man, and that where individuals of the same species are concerned, there may be degrees in respect of their accidental qualities, but not in respect of their forms or natures. So Césaire points out the contradiction of dehumanizing people, denying them their humanity and claiming they're primitive, while the supposed great thinkers amongst them, those who are proof that their civilization is superior, maintains that everyone possesses reason. So Césaire is not the only anti-colonial theorist to point out the contradictions in colonialism and colonial policy. Anti-colonial thinkers that have pointed out the contradictions in colonial logic. Another example of this is fellow Martinican thinker and philosopher Franz Fanon. In his book Les Damnés de la Terre, the wretches of the earth, he points out that Europe always talks of man, but destroys it everywhere it encounters him. So he says, quittons cette Europe, qui n'en finit pas de parler de l'homme, tout en le massacrant partout où elle le rencontre. À tout le coin de ses propres rues, à tout le coin de ses propres rues, à tout le coin du monde. So Europe was not consistent when it had the pretense of valuing man, despite all its supposed humanistic ideals. And it is also not consistent when it comes to attributing the faculty of reason as a shared commonality among humans, or valuing radical doubt as a principle that can be practiced by all. How universal is this radical doubt? Can truly anyone radically doubt the world around them? So, and then radically doubt the foundations of the world around them, as Descartes did, and then possibly formulate a critique based upon it. Of Fanon's major, so these are the questions that I write about in my research. And of Fanon's major works, Les Damnés de la Terre, the wretch of the earth, is the one most recognized as being explicitly about political action, as work focuses on decolonization and the pitfalls that have fought off colonialism. Those who have fought off colonialism might fall into. But for my own research, I primarily delve into peau noire, masque blanc, so black skin, white mask. And in peau noire, masque blanc, Fanon focuses on Black lived experiences and a consciousness of being racialized as Black. So he writes in chapter 5, chapter 5 called L'expérience du noir, sale nègre, ou simplement tiens, un nègre. J'arrivais dans le monde, soucieux de faire lever ensemble choses, mon âme pleine du désir d'être à l'origine du monde, et voici que je me découvrais objet au milieu d'autres objets. So this idea of being an object amongst other objects is an idea that can be found with other existentialist thinkers, such as Simone de Beauvoir, for whom this notion of being an object amongst other objects for the other is part of the human experience. And for her, this is part of the ambiguity of human existence, being pure interiority for oneself, but at the same time experiencing oneself as an object amongst other objects in the world. So she describes this in Pour une morale d'ambiguïté. I think in English it was translated to Ethics of Ambiguity, and in Dutch, Pleidooi voor een moraal der dubbelzinnigheid. So yet Fanon shows that when it comes to the black, something else happens. This shared human experience gains another dimension. As when it comes to the black in colonialism, the experience is that black people are actively being reduced to the state of an object. And this, for Fanon, is the function of the nègre, which to Fanon is explicitly not the same as being noir, which literally means black. Le noir, or l'homme de couleur, is a consciousness that is in itself and for itself. And for Fanon, the nègre is the antithesis of l'homme, of man. What then happens in colonialism is that for the nègre, any attempt to show a hint of subjectivity is essentially punished. Because the truth is, the colonized have always radically doubt the world around them, the world imposed on them. And the imposed order was not accepted as being a natural order. As American scholar Joyce E. King argues, our ancestors confronted the slave system that denied their humanity without doctrinous knowledge and spiritual authority that what the master was talking about did not represent reality truthfully or accurately, but instead represented the interest of the social category to which the master belonged. And in the colonial project, this confrontation is repressed in order to reinforce the colonial order. Colonizers would even go as far as preventing enslaved people from looking, as it was important to control the gaze. American scholar Bell Hooks writes about this as well. She says, black slaves and later manumitted servants could be brutally punished for looking, for appearing to observe the whites they were serving, as only a subject can observe or see. To be fully an object, then, was to lack the capacity to see or recognize reality. And so enslaved and colonized black people were also prevented from speaking. Grâce Ndjako's book Plantation Memories starts with a reflection on a particular mask enslaved Africans were made to wear, the mask of speechlessness. She says, formerly, the mask was used by white masters to prevent enslaved Africans from eating sugarcane or cocoa beans while working on the plantations. But its primary function was to implement a sense of speechlessness and fear, inasmuch as the mouth was a place of both muteness and torture. The Quilomba considers the mouth to be a special organ as it symbolizes speech and enunciation. Quilomba argues that this is the reason why the mouth then is specifically targeted within racism, as it needs to be controlled. And this practice of silencing black subjects raises the following questions with Quilomba. So why must the mouth of the black subject be fastened? Why must she or he be silenced? What could the black subject say if her or his mouth were not sealed? And what would the white subject have to listen to? And it is with these questions in mind that I looked at the speech of former Congolese Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba and the speech that he gave on the day that the Congo became independent. Why must his mouth be fastened, and why must he be silenced? What could he say if his mouth were not sealed? And what would the Belgian subject have to listen to? And for context, it is important to note that Patrice Lumumba gave his speech on the day of the Congolese independence after the Belgian king, King Baudouin, held his speech. So we will first look at King Baudouin, the roi Baudouin. So the view presented by King Baudouin, the roi Baudouin, did not resonate with Congolese people. After all, he's you understand the French a bit, he calls King Leopold II the one who committed a genocide that caused an international scandal, because let's not forget that the Congo was first private property of the King Leopold II. And after the atrocities in the Congo became public knowledge, it became a colony of the Belgian state, of the Belgian government. And then during this period was he also introduced his own so he imposed also slavery on the Congolese people and built like about approximately millions of people died in this in enslavement, building the railroad. That railroad that was built not for the Congolese people, but so that the Belgians could transport the minerals to the harbor. And so this King Leopold II, of this King Leopold II, the King Baudouin says, he came not as a conqueror, but as a bringer of civilization. And also that this king that had implemented the form of slavery, actually he saved them from slavery, of the Arab slave trade and forms of slavery that were there on the continent. That is then of course bad when it's done by when somebody other, because that's a form of just a sign of their barbaric cultures. But when they do it, it's just to bring civilization. And so this went against the experiences that the Congolese people had with Belgian colonialism, because of course they do. Even if they don't maybe all remember the reign of King Leopold II, who know about the various atrocities that were committed during colonialism, even as of recently, as it was just becoming independent. And so Patrice Lumumba, in his speech, wanted to speak to the Congolese experience of colonialism. So there's a stark contrast, as you can see, between the speeches of, on the one hand, Patrice Lumumba and the Roi Baudouin, the Belgian King Baudouin. But that's just when it comes to the content of the speech. But then when it comes to the reception of the speech of Lumumba, I also wants to compare it to the speech that Charles de Gaulle, very short, Charles de Gaulle gave when French was liberated from German occupation. So both Lumumba and Charles de Gaulle's speeches came after liberation, and yet the differences to the receptions of both speeches are stark. So Charles de Gaulle was praised, whereas there was a swift backlash to Patrice Lumumba's speech, a speech he gave in response to the one of the Belgian king gave, who praised the colonial endeavor. and it led to his eventual downfall, as Patrice Lumumba was only prime minister of the Congo for less than 6 months. And Lumumba was arrested in the beginning of December 1960, so not even 6 months after he held his speech. And on the day that the Congo, 6 months after the Congo became independent, and his speech held on the day on the day that Congo became independent eventually cost him his life. He got the post arrested and eventually killed over his critique of colonialism. So there's footage of Lumumba's arrest, and on one of the images, a soldier tries to shove a piece of paper in Patrice Lumumba's mouth. And so this piece of paper contains a copy of Lumumba's speech, because the soldier is trying to make Lumumba eat the paper to make him eat his own words. Mm-hmm. So, and then, so what I found then as a result very interesting is something Jean-Paul Sartre had written as the foreword to Léopold Senghor's Anthology of Négritude in an essay called L'Orphée Noir, Black Orpheus. He says, "What were you hoping when you removed the gags that stopped up these black mouths? That they would sing your praises? Did you think, when the heads our fathers had ground into the dust, had raised themselves up again, you would see adoration in their eyes? Here are black men standing, men looking at us, and I want you to feel, as I do, the shock of being seen. For the white man has, for 3,000 years, enjoyed the privilege of seeing without being seen." So in this quote, Sartre addresses his fellow countrymen, other white French people, and talks about the shock of being seen. And Bell Hooks argues that white control of the black gaze had been a tactic employed during slavery. So this was a way to deny the subjectivity of black people. So according to Hooks, to look there, to look directly was an assertion of subjectivity. To look is then a radical act in which the black person defies this attempted negation of their subjectivity. As Hope puts it, by courageously looking, we defiantly declared, not only will I stare, I want my look to change reality. And this black oppositional gaze, whereby the black person defies being categorized as a non-human other inferior to the white human, then also challenges the ways in which the white person is perceived. So the reality of the white person is being challenged, and thus the shock of being seen. And another step in establishing black agency is to speak of what is seen. So spaces, as Hook says, spaces of agency exist for black people, wherein we can both interrogate the gaze of the other, but also look back at one another, naming what we see. And so this is what was to be avoided at all costs: the shock of being seen, and Lumumba transgressed it through his speech. So Charles de Gaulle can give a voice to the experiences of French people under German occupation. He can also express their emotions. His responsibility is towards the French people, who would eventually become his constituents when he became president of France. And so my research is about the connection between the various images. So this, as they both represent black subjects being silenced, and with this, the idea that within racism, there's a need to control a black mouth. So this image of Esclave Anastasia and of Lumumba during his arrest. And so, however, there is a significant difference between the black subjects being represented in the images of Esclave Anastasia and Patrice Lumumba. So the image of Esclava Anastasia is that of an enslaved and colonized black subject. And the image of Patrice Lumumba is supposed to be that of a free black subject in a post-colonial moment in history. So in the words Sartre employs in Black Orpheus, Esclava Anastasia has had a gag stuck up her mouth and had her head grounded into the dust. And at the moment Lumumba held his speech, so on this picture, at the moment he held his speech on the day of the Congolese independence, he finally had the gag removed from his mouth. And then there's the moment of freedom symbolized in Lumumba's speech on the second image, leading to a position in the third image that is similar to that of the colonized symbolized in the first image. Lumumba defied an expectation of what he should say. But what was the expectation? What was expected to come out of the mouth of a Congolese subject that could now, on the day of Congolese independence, finally say something? Just as he did to his French countrymen, Sartre could ask the Belgians, "What were you hoping for? Do you expect them to sing your praises?" Okay, so the Quilombo posits that the mouth not only symbolizes speech and enunciation, but that in the case of Esclava Anastasia, it's also a metaphor for possession, as the black subject is imagined to possess something that belongs to the white subject. In the case of enslaved people on the plantation, this would be the fruits that are harvested on the plantation. So although the plantation and its foods morally belong to the colonized, the colonizer interpreted perversely, reading it as a sign of robbery. So we are taking what is theirs becomes they are taking what is theirs. And Quilombo argues that in racism, this denial has the purpose of maintaining and legitimizing violent structures of racial exclusion. So the black subject then needs to be controlled. She sums it up as follows: we are taking what is theirs is denied and projected onto the other. They are taking what is ours. Who becomes what the white subject does not want to be acquainted with. And so King Baudouin, as a white subject, had the right to speak. The white subject's own speech, while the black subject, Lumumba, in wanting to speak and eventually speaking, is taking what is theirs. And so by critiquing the colonial subject, Lumumba asserted his colonial project, Lumumba asserted his subjectivity. His speech and its confronting and contesting nature came from a subject who in a colonial framework is not supposed to be a subject. Lumumba was, in the eyes of the Belgian colonizers, not a black political leader. He was, in the words of Fanon, he was nègre. Lumumba was made to eat his words to bring him back to the situation of the nègre, a being who cannot observe and cannot critique. Lumumba was nègre, but so were the leaders that are praised within the lands. So as your typical white liberal praises Nelson Mandela or Martin Luther King Jr. and Barack Obama, they are only praised for in as far as they reconcile themselves with whiteness. So neither are in itself and for itself. Mandela, Martin Luther King, and Obama are only praised for how they relate to the white, how they are taught to relate to the white, as there is a lot of selective reading in Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela. So the same movement then takes place. So this is what Fanon writes about in l'expérience véhiculée du noir. J'arrive lentement dans le monde, habitué à ne plus prétendre au surgissement. Je m'achemine par rotation. Déjà, les regards blancs, les seuls vrais, me dissèquent. Je suis fixé. Ayant accommodé leur microtome, ils réalisent objectivement l'écoute de ma réalité. Je suis trahi. Je sens, je vois dans ces regards blancs que ce n'est pas un nouvel homme qui entre, mais un nouveau type d'homme, un nouveau genre, un nègre, quoi. So it then becomes pertinent for the noir to remain noir and not become nègre. To do as Fanon suggests at the end of Les Damnés de la Terre, quittons cette Europe qui n'en finit pas de parler de l'homme, tout en le massacrant partout où elle le rencontre. So, à tout le coin de ses propres rues, à tout le coin du monde. And so this massacring is not only literal, it's also by making the noir into nègre, as to become nègre is to die as a human. And so quittons cette Europe, leave Europe and its very narrow definition of the human. So I won't go any further because I see that there's a lack of time. But just I would like to point out that this critique of Black people speaking out is it is an ongoing problem. I just want to show of to end a very just to say, you know, that is also something that Black feminists such as also Audre Lorde writes about that oftentimes when Black people voice their critique, they are often met with the response that they're supposedly too angry or irritated. And so we saw this here with Sylvana Simons, but also Patrick Lumumba, because this Belgian historian, David van Rijbroek, when in his book on the Congo, that is his critique of Patrick Lumumba. He says that he was too angry, even though, as he saw in this, as we watched the speech, he was not angry. He was just factually stating what the Congolese people experienced during colonialism. But that is already too much. It's too angry. And so this, in my research, I write about this whole idea of being too angry, but also of being uppity. But because there's little time, I will leave it at that for now.